Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on what we hope will be a very informative webinar on the CFWI, the Central Florida Water Initiative. My name is John Shearer, and I serve as the CFWI facilitator. I will be giving a presentation on some background information and overview of the CFWI. We'll have another presentation that will discuss the regional water supply planning process. And when we complete that, we're going to take your questions and provide answers to your concerns about the CFWI. We have a great panel here today. I'd like to introduce Gary Freeze from Polk County Utilities, Ray Scott, the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, Mark Hammond, the Southwest Florida Water Management District, and Tom Bartol with St. Johns River Water Management District. Now, you are invited to submit your questions during the presentations, and we'll pick them up during the Q&A process that will occur shortly. You know, when you hear CFWI, it is what we mean for the Central Florida Water Initiative. Today, our presentation will discuss why the CFWI is important, why water supply planning in Central Florida is important, and we will be addressing the challenges for providing water supply, not just today, but for the long-term future in Florida. What is the CFWI? The CFWI is the Central Florida Water Initiative collaborative water supply planning effort between the state's three largest water management districts, the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, and the region's water utilities. The CFWI covers 5 counties, including Orange, Osceola, Seminole, Polk, and the southern part of Lake County. It also covers 3 water management district areas: Southwest, South Florida, and the St. Johns River. Just to give you some background on the water resources in the region, there are several major river systems within the headwaters of the CFWI. The shaded areas represent different elevations. The river basins coincide with the borders of the water management districts. But there are also several distinct groundwater basins within the CFWI, and as you can see from this graphic, they do not coincide with the boundaries of the water management district. Those basins are Volusia, East Central Florida, Southern West Central Florida, Central West Central Florida, and Northern West Central Florida. So we have several challenges before us that has to be addressed by this initiative. First, we feel we are reaching the sustainable groundwater limits in the area, but the area is going to continue to grow and need water resources for the future, so we have to plan on making that water available. And because of the 3 water management districts, we want to be sure the regulatory programs for each of those districts do not overlap and support each other. We have a CFWI steering committee, which provides the oversight for the area and guidance. It includes 1 representative from the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, the Florida Department of Environmental Protection, the St. Johns River Water Management District Governing Board, the South Florida Water Management District Governing Board, the Southwest Florida Water Management District Governing Board, and 1 representative from about the 90 utilities that we have in the area. The steering committee is that primary oversight group, and the guidance is provided within a document called a guidance document. It is online and available at cfwiwater.com. It's 30 pages in length, and it provides in detail the scope of work for each of the technical groups and what is going to be accomplished by their effort. And most importantly, it's online, it's available for review, and it was just updated last week based on the most recent steering committee meeting. The steering committee is open to the public, and we encourage you to attend. Within the guidance documents, the CFWI effort has 3 guiding principles, which really speaks to everything we're trying to accomplish within the region. The first guiding principle is to identify the sustainable quantities of traditional groundwater sources available for water supplies that can be used without causing unacceptable harm to water resources and associated natural systems. Simply stated, how much groundwater do we have available to us? The second guiding principle is to develop strategies to meet water demands that are in excess of the sustainable yield for traditional groundwater sources. And the third principle is to establish consistent rules and regulations for the 3 water management districts that meet their collective goals and implement the results of the Central Florida Water Initiative. So far, we have addressed many of the challenges. We, for the first time, have a shared groundwater model that's used by the water management districts, by the public suppliers, by the self-suppliers. We have one coordinated strategy for the development of minimum flows and levels, which is the regulatory program that protects our water resources. And then finally, for the first time, we have one single regional water supply plan that describes what water supply will be needed and how we're going to do it in the future. In the past, we had 3 plans, one for each of the water management districts. We've had technical work ongoing for the last 2 years. We have technical teams doing a variety of technical effort. Their work is coming to conclusion, which we expect in the near term. And the work of the technical teams will be included in the draft regional water supply plan. Tom Bartol's presentation, which will be next, will discuss some of the findings of the groundwater availability team, and that really provides the amount of sustainable groundwater in the Central Florida region. And then finally, I'll talk about the creation of a new team we're going to just start to develop solutions for CFWI, which includes what projects will be needed, what changes to our regulatory programs might be needed, what financing might be necessary, and more importantly, what monitoring we need to do. The new solution team I just mentioned has been formed to develop strategies to meet these demands. We hope to be able to identify means to optimize existing groundwater, make the best with what we have. That includes withdrawal and recharge in the area. Identifying viable demand management activities includes conservation and other alternatives. Identifying alternative water supplies. Identifying any areas that may require recovery, which is to say we might have exceeded some of our groundwater limits in that area. And then finally, identify areas where consistency and rules will be needed. So, please submit your questions during the webinar. We will answer your questions during the question and answer session following these presentations. As we change presenters, information about our public workshop next month will be up on the monitor.
Good afternoon, I'm Tom Bartol, and I'm the Chief of the Bureau of Water Supply at the St. Johns River Water Management District. More importantly, I'm here representing all of the staff and the hard work that has gone into developing this technical work and the tools that we can use to evaluate the water resources of the area. I'm leading the water supply planning team that has representatives from the water management districts, the water suppliers, the utilities, the Department of Environmental Protection, and the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. I'm going to talk about what a water supply plan is. I'm going to talk about the components and the elements of those water supply plan and the importance of your involvement and the public involvement in this planning process. Importantly, this slide, there's a couple of numbers I want to relate here. One is this shows water use over time from the 1960s to now, which is in the blue, to 2010. And water use for the past 10 or 15 years in this area has been fairly constant and stable, and it's approximately 800 million gallons per day. But you can see in yellow on the slide that we are projecting that water use to go up to 1.1 billion gallons by 2035. That's one of the main reasons why we're conducting this water supply planning process. Along with that, we do demand projections in the water supply plans, and the population of the Central Florida Water Initiative area is expected to increase from current population of about 2.7 million people all the way up to 4.1 million people, or an increase of 1.4 million people over this planning period. Now, not only is the population projected and the water demands projected to increase, but we've also seen a change in where the groundwater withdrawals have been occurring. And this map shows groundwater withdrawals in gallons per day per square mile. And you can see on the left part of the slide, in 1980, the darker squares are the higher groundwater withdrawals, and you can see in the southwest portion of the CFWI that increased water use and now has shifted over to the center or the center north of this area. And that's important because the locations of those groundwater withdrawals can have important effects on the water resources of the area. As John mentioned, this is the first time that we have one plan, a multi-district plan, a regional plan. An important part of this plan is to ensure that we can protect the resources and the related natural systems, and our job is to identify a sustainable water supply through the planning period. The regional water supply plan will look out and look at those demands on a 20-year horizon. An important part of that is the evaluation of water resources. And then also the plan will look at ways to meet those demands, potential sources, and project options. We also will talk about how we can fund these projects, and the water supply plans get updated every 5 years. Now, again, I said the importance of the water resource evaluation. What we do in the water supply planning process is take those demands and put them into models that, if they're groundwater withdrawals, we will see changes in the aquifer levels. By themselves, those changes in the aquifer levels aren't of concern, but when those aquifer levels lower, we are concerned that they could have effects on the water resources. And I'll talk about which water resources soon. We look at the availability of groundwater from multiple measuring sticks to ensure that we protect those water resources of the region. What kind of water resources and measuring sticks am I referring to? One of the primary ones are water bodies with established minimum flows and levels in the areas. And minimum flows and levels are levels that the district sets and adopts to ensure that the water resources do not experience harm. And we also look at non-MFL or minimum flows and levels lakes, wetlands, springs. We look at aquifer quality changes, and we look at saltwater intrusion into the aquifer from these withdrawal effects. Now, this is a generalized finding from all of the hard work that's been done in the Central Florida Water Initiative, and that is that traditional groundwater sources can meet some, but not all, projected and currently permitted needs in the CFWI. This shows areas that are particularly sensitive to groundwater withdrawals, and there's 5 generalized areas on this map. Also, I want to highlight that these are general areas, so it's not like somebody could be in or outside of these areas. We wanted to show that these are just the general areas that are susceptible to groundwater withdrawals. From the north of this slide, you see the Wekiva Springs and the Wekiva River system. We see lakes in West Seminole and West Orange County. To the west, we have sensitive water bodies and water resources in South Lake County. And then down the middle of the slide, all the way through Polk County, is the Lake Wales Ridge. And then in the southwest portion of this slide, you see the Southern Water Use Caution Area, which is an area that has been known to have some water resource issues for many years. Now, if you recall, I had mentioned before that our current water use is about 800 million gallons per day. And I also gave you a number of 1.1 billion gallons per day that we project will be needed in the year 2035. Through this planning process, we have determined that the sustainable level of traditional groundwater sources is approximately 850 million gallons per day. So that is 50 million gallons per day above the current water use in the area. And when we look at that compared to the 1.1 billion gallons, we see that there's approximately 250 million gallons per day of new water supply options that are needed in the Central Florida Water Initiative area. This shows that story graphically from, on the left, 0 to 1.1 billion gallons per day. You can see the current water use is at the 800 level, and there's an additional approximately 50 million gallons per day available until we would have to look at other sources, including alternative water supply. Now, what are those other water supply options? Well, the first one I'm going to talk about is water conservation. Water conservation is usually the least expensive option. And water conservation can stretch out the use of existing groundwater sources into the future. I often get asked as individuals, what can I do about these water resources and water use? And my response is to eliminate the wasteful use of fresh groundwater and engage personally into water conservation practices. And we have seen a great effect in the Central Florida Water Initiative area about water conservation. Some of the other water supply options we are looking at in the water supply plan include brackish groundwater, the use of surface water, which is already used in the area, the use of seawater, or desalination, and the largest number of projects that we're looking at are in the area of reclaimed water, and the objective there is to maximize the use of reclaimed water for such things as irrigation. And then we are also looking at storage capacity for capturing wet weather flows, store that, and use that for irrigation purposes also. We are interested in engaging all stakeholders in the water supply planning process, from environmental groups, individuals, local governments, planning councils, advisory committees, and these stakeholders are an important part of giving us feedback and providing us information that you may have that we can use in water supply planning. This slide talks about local governments, and there is a link between this water supply planning process and local government planning. Once the water management districts approve the regional water supply plan, then local governments must amend their comprehensive plan to include 10-year water supply facilities work plans. And these facility work plans must demonstrate sufficient water for at least the next 10 years. The district is willing to work with water suppliers to identify projects, and often we're able to cost share on some of these important water supply projects. This is a public process that we're involved in now. We want governments and stakeholders to review the plan, make sure that we properly have reflected the needs of the local areas, look at our population projections, and again, we do want to work with others to identify projects to meet these future demands. This webinar is part of our public involvement schedule. The next up is a public workshop that will be in Winter Park in September 26th. We have a technical methods workshop in Osceola County in November. That will be more detailed for those who are interested in modeling, etc., and we'll go through our technical methods at that. We have a draft workshop planned in December in Lake County. It is currently our plan to have the draft water supply plan released in late November, and that would begin the public comment period for you to be able to provide us written comments or any other comments on the plan. So that concludes my presentation on the Regional Water Supply Plan, and now we'll get back to the next phase of it, which will be the questions and answers.
Hi, I'm John Shearer, your facilitator, and we're going to take your questions online. We've received several. All the presentations today, both the one I gave and the one that Tom Bartol gave, will be posted to the CFWI website after today's conclusion. So let's get on with our questions and answer part of the agenda. And again, I would just like to reintroduce who's with us today. Gary Fries from Polk County Utilities.
Good afternoon.
How are you? Mark Hammond with Southwest Florida Water Management District.
John, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Good.
And Tom Bartol, you met earlier with the St. Johns River Water Management District. And last but not least, Ray Scott from the Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services.
Good to be here.
Our first question will come up. What is going to be the biggest challenge to meet the water needs in the CFWI?
John, I'll take that just as an overall answer. I think what we all want to do is come up with water supply options that are cost effective, and the other side of that, that protect the water resources of the area.
Good, thank you. Our next question. Will there be a regional water supply authority in the CFWI area?
CFWI area encompasses most of Central Florida, as you know, and several years ago, a group now called the Stopper Group was formed to discuss and look at water supply issues. Stopper is an acronym for St. Cloud, Toho Water Authority, Polk County, Orange County, and Reedy Creek that serves Disney. So most of the people that provide water in the Central Florida area are represented in that group. That group has been working together very closely, and we see that it'll continue over the long term. Additionally, in Polk County, we're talking about creating a water supply entity that will address future water supply needs throughout all of Polk County. Polk County has 17 municipalities located in it, and as well as the county that provides water. So there's lots of opportunity for water supply and water demand issues to be resolved in those groups.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mark.
John, in our district we've got three regional entities that have really helped to address the water supply issues in our district, and they've been instrumental in meeting the long-term supplies in there. So we think those are very effective programs.
Your district is Southwest Florida.
In the Southwest District, yeah. One in Tampa Bay, down in south and in Charlotte Harbor area, and then one up north in the Withlacoochee River region.
Okay, very good. Another question just came in. We've been hearing about the groundwater shortfall for years. What is new now?
Yeah, John, you know, as you were pointing on your presentation earlier, the water management districts were formed based along surface watersheds because our responsibilities back in the day were flood protection. Now our responsibilities include water supply, and groundwater, which is our largest source of supply, doesn't follow those same boundaries. And so the 3 water management districts, working with the utilities and the entities in the region, have developed a groundwater model that spans the entire region. And then we looked at the lakes and the wetlands within the region and developed measuring sticks that we could compare consistently, and have just concluded our work over the last year and a half to come up with the groundwater availability that Tom presented in his presentation. And that's really the new work that's been done.
You mentioned the public suppliers. Was agriculture also involved in this?
Yes.
And the self-suppliers?
Yeah, Ray Scott has been involved in this, and the Department of Ag has been involved from the get-go on that.
Very good, very good. We have another question. How are water conservation practices and best management practices important in this process? Who would like to take that?
Let me start with water conservation, and then what we have determined, and one of the great findings we have seen in the CFWI process, is the amount of conservation that's already been done in this area. We have calculated the measuring stick, one of the measuring sticks is gallons per capita per day. And that is how much each individual uses per day. And we've seen since 1995 approximately a 40% decrease in the water use, gallons per capita per day. So over that time, that 1995 to 2010, we've seen an increase of population of 1 million, but water use has been about the same. So there's been great strides in this area on water conservation.
Also in the area of agricultural water use, I think generally speaking, we've seen over the last several decades just a general change from less efficient to more efficient irrigation systems. Those of you that spent your lives in Florida, I'm sure remember back in the 60s and 70s seeing the overhead towers and the citrus groves that were throwing water everywhere. And you know, these days we've pretty much gone to drip irrigation across the board for citrus production. There's some specific things going on in the CFWI area, have been going on for some time, continue to. We have mobile irrigation labs that serve the area that basically help farmers to evaluate the efficiency of their existing irrigation systems, look at upgrades to equipment, or even sometimes just changes in management practices to conserve and get more production for the same amount of water. Very recent development that we're excited about, there is a Florida Automated Weather Network. We have for some time now, been installing farm-specific weather stations and developing mobile apps to be used with those weather stations so that farmers can basically get on their phone, whether it be for freeze protection or just scheduling regular irrigation, use the results of a network of weather stations to very much tailor those irrigation practices to the needs of their crop.
Additionally, from the utilities perspective, conservation is our best way of extending the life of our water supply. So it's important to us to make sure that conservation is practiced and that we do everything we can to encourage it. I know most of the utilities within Central Florida have used different conservation measures and initiatives to encourage citizens to participate. Everything from toilet replacements to irrigation system monitoring devices, and it's all leading to better, more efficient use for our water.
That's great. These have been some great discussions. We have many more that are coming in, but we're going to take a short break, and we're going to show you some important features of the website, cfwiwater.com. On the left-hand side of your screen, there's a summary of the meetings that occur, the Regional Water Supply Plan details, and then some of the technical work of the different technical groups that we've had working on this important initiative. And any special announcements that might be important to understand will be at the top of the website, such as this interactive webinar description. If you scroll down to the bottom of the website, and you'll see the Central Florida Water Initiative guidance document. You click on that link, and there's a PDF of the large document that's there. It was last updated August the 16th, so it's there for your review. There's also a calendar if you're interested on all the technical teams and when they're meeting and their outputs that are required to keep this important project on track. And there's some simple overview sheets that kind of provide content of what we're trying to provide. Also at the bottom of this page, if you want to do some follow-up, the key people with each of the water management districts and myself, our web email addresses are there. And then finally, if you're interested in receiving notices of upcoming meetings or any other additional information, there's a place for you to sign on. Just click on that site, enter the information, and you'll be on the website's mailing list. And then finally, I just want to click on one of the meetings so you can see the type of robust information that's provided. Each of the steering committee meetings, when they meet, we provide ahead of time the meeting agenda, and we provide the presentations ahead of time. And then after the meeting, we summarize what the results were, and we update any presentations that need to be updated. So please be sure to take advantage of that website, look at it, and understand what we're trying to accomplish. And then finally, if you have any suggestions that you might feel to make that website more functional to you, just please let us know. As I mentioned, we have quite a few more questions that came in, so let's take the next question. How severe is saltwater intrusion in our groundwater supply?
Let me just start by saying in St. John's on the north and the east side, we're fairly far away from the coastline, so we don't see any issues associated with lateral or saltwater intrusion moving from the ocean or the coast in, but we do have to be careful, and water withdrawals have to be careful of taking water from the bottom of the aquifer and getting more salt water or saline water up. And we have several programs, and those utilities that have those issues are well aware of those.
Yeah, and John, in the Southwest District, the saltwater intrusion is not an issue in the Polk County region, but it is in our coastal areas of Hillsborough and Manatee County, and we have an aquifer level that we've established to slow down the rate of saltwater intrusion and to protect for that.
Would people be surprised if some of our groundwater withdrawals in Polk County might impact saltwater intrusion?
We're not anticipating that because of the aquifer levels that we've set, but obviously if you withdraw enough, you can have water quality degradation that Tom was talking about more on a local area.
Good, very good. Okay, another question. If our springs are below their minimum flows and levels, how is it that we have more available for new consumptive use permits? That's an excellent question.
Let me just start by saying the springs, and we have identified this for many years, the springs are reaching their minimum flows and levels right now. And actually one of the sustainable limits that I had talked about before was the springs of the Wekiva, because approximately at 850 million gallons per day, we see those springs not those minimum flows and levels, the flow out of those springs not being met. So we've monitored this for the past several years, and we acknowledge that we're reaching the sustainable limits and not impact those springs.
Good. All right. Another question. If a municipality is not a water supplier, what is their role in this process?
I'll try to answer that. Again, if they're not a supplier, but they're a bulk purchaser of water, their responsibility would be to run their system very efficiently, to look at conservation measures that they could develop and use in their system, and to encourage their citizens to be conscientious about water use. monitor how much irrigation is going on. Obviously, irrigation takes a great deal of water from us, and if we can minimize that, that's a great way to help with a city like that. They can also be involved from the standpoint of participating in county-wide or area-wide conservation programs and help to get educational information out to their citizens and to the students in their communities. And all of that can help reduce water use.
Do you have any municipalities in Polk County that are not a supplier that rely on Polk County utilities for their water?
Well, Polk County has several systems scattered throughout the county that serve very small areas, 100 users or even less. And so we kind of address a lot of that. There are some very small users in the county, and then there is one city that does not provide any water, and that Polk County provides water for.
Okay, good, good.
John, what you, I think also for a municipality that's not a supplier, they can also engage in the process, that Tom spoke about in terms of the regional water supply planning process over the next several months to understand better and provide input in terms of solutions and things that we can all do better. So I think that's a great opportunity for them.
So not everybody is a supplier, but everybody is a consumer. Would
Yes.
you say that?
That's an excellent point.
Yeah. Okay. Another question. This is for agriculture. Agriculture is a large water user in the CFWI. What is agriculture doing to conserve water?
Just to sort of reiterate some of the things I'd said before, I mean, fundamentally improving irrigation efficiency is a primary one. The thing that I would like to add about that too is, I mean, there's a couple of parts to that. There's certainly having efficient irrigation systems, but the other part of that, and it relates back to some of the things I was saying about the automated weather network, it's also a matter of monitoring and managing water use. And I think one thing that people need to understand about agriculture is that water is one of the primary inputs for agriculture, and hence it can be a significant cost if you figure in the fuel or electricity that's needed to pump water. So it's if you are a wise businessman in agriculture, you are using the minimum amount of water that you need to produce the crop that you are trying to produce on that particular piece of land.
Very good, thank you. The questions are just flying in, so we have another one here. Will water reduction alternatives and alternative water supplies be identified through this process? Tom?
Yes, one of my slides was on water supply options, and we look at water supply options from the demand side. And Gary talked about water conservation. I talked about what successes we've seen in this area. We also will identify many projects to be able to address new sources of water and not go over that sustainable level for fresh groundwater.
Yeah, additionally, we've started to look at alternative water supply that does not necessarily come from the upper Floridan aquifer, and that has really given us some insight as to what's available and what's not available. The resource that we've always used has been a fairly cheap resource. Water has been available, go out and drill a well, and you have water. Well, that's obviously not going to continue, and as CFWI is finding out, we're very limited on how much more, or if we could even pump the amount that we've already permitted. So we've got to start finding other alternatives, and especially in Polk County's case, we are not sitting next to the ocean, so we can't desal and start a desal plant. But we can find water in other locations, going deeper into less ideal water quality aquifers, and potentially getting enough water to satisfy our future demand. So we are looking at those alternatives, and we're very excited about what some of those will bring to us.
Well, here's an interesting question. What is going to be done about existing groundwater deficits and impacts to surface waters?
John, that's something we've been working on over the last year and a half in terms of how much groundwater is available. And as Tom presented there, is that there's not enough groundwater to meet all of our future needs out there. And so through the water supply plan, they've identified options for how you would meet those needs or those deficits over and above what groundwater can provide. And then the solutions team will be working to develop those specific strategies. And those will be strategies for public supply utilities, like Polk County and the other municipalities and local governments, but also look at any strategies for agriculture in terms of that they're an important player in that in terms of developing solution strategies for them too for the future. And then we'll also be working in terms of areas where we've seen impacts or may have future impacts. There are management strategies and activities that are ongoing right now that to mitigate those or offset those impacts in terms of deepening wells or relocating wells in some cases, or recharging with reclaimed or other sources. And so those will be some of the types of opportunities that we'll be able to employ to avoid those impacts.
I know if we continue to pump, we expect to see impacts, but are we seeing any impacts now?
Anytime you withdraw, you see some effects out there, and we've seen those, and those are some of the areas there that we are managing around. Existing permits have conditions and requirements in terms of making sure that they're not causing harms. And the local governments and utilities, they work very well with us in terms of addressing those issues.
And agriculture.
And agriculture.
Yes, very good. Is the groundwater model you just mentioned available?
I believe it is available. We are finishing up some of the documentation, but we can check with the technical groups in terms of if the model itself is available. It is a high-powered model, so in terms of some of the computer capabilities and the amount of data that's in those models, some systems may be limited in terms of what they were. And Tom, you might be able to speak to some of that.
Yes, it's very computationally challenging. A lot of very large databases. So I would be surprised if any average user can use it. As a matter of fact, we had to put together several computers in the districts to be able to run this model.
But if anybody's interested, I guess the easiest way for them to access it, if they can't find a link online, is just to contact one of our people mentioned on the top of the website, and they'll find you the right person and get you the right answer.
Let me just follow up with that last question. We are having a technical methods workshop, and we will have the modelers, the ones who built this model and are running this model, and all of these technical challenges they've met and been able to work through. We'll have them available for that technical methods workshop that we've shown before. So that would be a good, if anybody's interested in the details of that, that would be a good opportunity to talk to those teams.
Mark, you just on the model again, it was developed in conjunction with somebody who I think we haven't mentioned yet either.
The USGS, United States Geological Services, we worked with them in developing that groundwater model. There really is state-of-the-art and it covers the region. And so as Tom mentioned, that information will be available through those technical workshops. Would be a great opportunity for people to interact with the technical folks on that.
Very good. Good. Another question, and this all sounds very well, but how is this going to affect the average home water consumer?
Let me just start off that I think one of the key parts of the solution space is to be able to find cost-effective solutions. But certainly those of us in the water supply business understand that as we reach limits of fresh groundwater, that these alternative supplies will cost more. Hopefully we can maximize that, and there are techniques that we can use to blend water, etc. But eventually, I think throughout the 2035, I think we'll have to see some slight increases in the cost of potable water.
But the other thing that this means for our consumers and our customers is that they'll have water. And that's the big question is, do we have enough water and to continue to provide it? And so we've started looking 40, 50 years out to make sure that we've got water available so that future generations and do not run out of water, and that we make smart decisions now so that we can make sure that there is water available.
You bring up a good point. It reminds me of some work EPA did, Environmental Protection Agency, recently, and they've done surveys of water users around the country, including Florida, and the number one concern of our citizens is having a reliable source of supply. So when they turn the spigot on, we get water. The second biggest concern is that water that we turn on that comes out of the faucet is safe. And then, interestingly enough, the distant third is the cost. So in that order, I think that holds throughout the whole country, and I think agriculture would say the same.
I think so.
So, okay. More questions. How in-depth will Regional Water Supply Plan be in identifying sources and future projects to meet those demands?
Well, besides rolling up all these water supply options by category, for example, we'll have a category of brackish groundwater, we'll have a category of surface water projects, we'll have a category of reclaimed water. We will have a list of the projects as we know them now, and it will be quite extensive. It'll talk about It'll have a project description, how much water will be provided by this project, who we anticipate would be the project sponsors, and when I say a long list, I'm thinking more than 125 projects already identified for the water supply plan.
Yeah, and John, also there, through the groundwater analysis, we looked and think that there could be some additional groundwater that's available within the region. And however, you can look at it as the low-hanging fruit will have all been picked, but they may be able to develop some additional supplies with some additional management activities, and so that's also is one of the options there that can be considered in the future.
Good. More questions are coming in. That's great. In the future, with an improved regional water supply plan, will our consumptive use permitting process be changed or addressed differently?
Well, I think with the CFWI, there's really three guiding principles, as you touched on earlier, John. The first is the sustainable groundwater availability, and we've got that. The second is the solutions. What are the strategies to meet those demands over and above what the groundwater? And then the third is consistent rules and regulations so that we can manage those resources going forward. And so we see that's a critical piece of the CFWI initiative is that now that we got the groundwater, we're working on the solutions now, and then is to develop any rules and regulations and the policies to help us manage the resource within the region.
Anything else? Okay. All right, another great question here. Who will control the one modeling effort for this initiative, and will it be used within the districts in other areas?
Well, we are discussing now collaborative efforts to do that. As Mark and I said before, this is a large model. It actually took the geographic area of 3 models before. So we are talking about having a group that would maintain the model, keep the files up to date, and we may have to hire a consultant, for example, to do some of that. But we do see it as a 3-district collaborative process with the water suppliers, DEP and DACS, Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, to be able to collaboratively take the model and keep it up to date and use it in other planning and regulatory processes.
Well, that's a good point. It's currently just used for planning purposes now.
It is.
And I understand it's the intent to kind of develop it further.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Very good. Another question, very good question here. What demographic numbers will you use to determine where water is needed? All areas are not growing at the same rate.
A little bit of background on the population numbers. We do, in the water management districts and the water supply planning use projections from the University of Florida's Bureau of Economic and Business Research. We call that BEBR, B-E-B-R. And actually, we are required to use those numbers.
Required by state law.
By state law. Now, BEBR is the official demographers of the state, so they do this. They have a very good track record of projections. So we take those projections, and they're only at the county level. So the next task that the water supply team has is to take those county level projections and put that population into public supply service areas, for example, Gary service areas. That's a little more tricky. That doesn't get done right all the time, but we do think that many of these demands are regional, and so whether we get it in the right town or the right service area, when we look at the water resources regionally, I think those planning numbers serve us well to look at the future demands.
Most of what we've talked about has been very technical in nature. Most of the work in the last 2 years has been very technical in nature, and there's not been a lot of opportunity for public input. And this question really speaks to that. Will the water supply plan be close to finalization before you receive public input, such that the districts will not want to make changes or adjustments?
No, that's not the intent at all, that we do not want to make changes or adjustments. We did start out this public process in the water supply planning over a year ago with a public meeting that was well attended, and we talked about the process then. But really, we wanted to have something for people to read and comment on, and we're just getting to that stage now. So as I mentioned before, in late November, we will have this plan available. Draft plan, and it will be, there'll be summaries, there'll be a detailed technical appendices, but once that plan is released, then we are actively soliciting comments, and we will respond to the comments and make changes to that plan as we get it finalized.
And perhaps we're discussing using the website to facilitate the interaction of comments on those plans.
We are, and we expect a minimum of a 45-day public comment period, so there should be plenty of time, and during that time we'll still have opportunities for public input into the process.
And then you mentioned it in your presentation, but at the end of the process, the final adoption of those plans is?
The final approval of the plans by the district's water management, the water management governing boards is scheduled for late spring, early summer, maybe April, May.
And that's a function of how much changes might be needed and everything. So there's a great opportunity for everybody to participate in this. So another question. The South Florida Water Management District currently has pilot projects using agriculture lands to store water during rainfall events without the need to build expensive infrastructure. Has this group looked into similar projects as well? And how to fund these dispersed projects? So I guess there's two questions to that. Have we looked at it, and will it be funded?
As far as looking at, we've definitely within the Regional Water Supply Plan team, and specifically the Water Supply Options teams, have discussed some of those ideas, and as part of that process have identified some of the programs that are currently available. For instance, in the Southwest Florida Water Management District, we have the FARMS program, which I believe is the Facilitated Agricultural Resource Management.
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry about the acronyms, folks. I do try and figure those out. So, not specifically the Payment for Environmental Services program that's being done in South Florida, but certainly we've looked at some similar options and where those might be applicable within the CFWI region.
And in fact, the storing water on the farmlands is, I think, integral into some of the Everglades restoration discussions that are ongoing now.
Absolutely.
And we see as one of the critical components and strategy that we've used is working with the ag community in terms of funding some of the alternative sources and the conservation. It's been very helpful in terms of meeting our sustainability of supplies.
Well, we're running short on time, and we'll just take one last question, and I think this is a very good one. We mentioned we've been doing this for about 2 years with the technical work, but the question is it too late to get involved in the development of the Central Florida Water Supply Plan?
Well, let me say it's never too late to get involved with our planning. If you want to get involved before we release a draft plan, feel free to contact the contact points that you see on that CFWI website, and we will get you to the right person, the right team member to talk about your interests, concerns, and feedback and input into the Regional Water Supply Plan.
Right.
And just another point, we are already beginning to schedule meetings for the next update of the CFWI Regional Water Supply Plan, so certainly there are opportunities to be involved in the future as well. This planning process is one that is ongoing.
To quote the great Yogi Berra, it's not over till it's over, right?
And we would welcome and encourage it.
Yes, very good. Well, we don't have any more time to take more questions, although we do have some additional ones, and we will post those additional questions online as well as all these questions and the presentations on the website and answer those. I would like to thank everybody for participating in this webinar, and I would especially like to thank the Polk County Board of County Commissioners and the PGTV staff for helping facilitate this effort. We are recording this webinar, and we're going to post it on the website, and as I mentioned earlier, the presentations will be posted on the website, even though they might have not come through on some of your computers due to some technical difficulty. Then finally, there's a link on your monitor for a follow-up survey. Please take time to check that link. We value your feedback. And we all hope to meet you in this process at some point in the upcoming public workshops. Anything to close, Gary?
Thank
Ray?
you for having us here.
Yeah,
you.
Mark?
And thanks, John, very much.
All right, very good. Thanks everybody for participating. Have a great day.